There's no surprise that the world faces a significant food security challenge. The latest report from the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that 805 million people in the world are chronically malnourished. And, there are two things, while that doesn't surprise you, there are two things that when I talk about food security often do surprise people. The first is that this year, last year, for many years now, we've actually produced enough food in the world to provide every man, woman, and child with a minimum of 2,700 calories per day. So the issue we face isn't one of global supply, but more of local availability and access by the people who need it the most. The second thing that often surprises people is that of the 805 million chronically malnourished people, over half of them are farmers and their families. It's that fragile subsegment of the agriculture system based on smallholders that is so much at risk and yet at the same time so important. They're a key piece of the puzzle, and they need policies and programs that help them move beyond subsistence into commercial success and ultimately into the middle class. And to address pervasive food insecurity, we need NGOs and governments and the private sector to work together and to focus on smallholder farmers and find ways to strengthen them and their operations, to move them forward, to ultimately build sustainable agriculture-based economic growth. Before we look at one program that's making a difference, let's recall for a minute, for those of us old enough to remember 30 years ago, when we turned on the television set and unfolding before our eyes was a terrible famine in Ethiopia. Adults and children starving, walking toward feeding stations, collapsing, sadly often dying in the arms of aid workers. That horrible famine in Ethiopia in the 1980s was not the worst famine in human history, but it was the first one to be recorded by live 24-hour cable news. In the words of one commentator at the time, it was the famine that shocked the world. And governments and NGOs and celebrities mobilized. You may recall or have heard about Live Aid and the hundreds of concerts that reached over 2 billion people in 150 nations. Yet at the same time, famine is as old as humankind itself, despite the fact that, as I said, we've been producing enough food to be able to feed everyone in the world. Hunger is still pervasive, even in this country, where last year 1 in 7 people experienced some form of food insecurity. So how can we move food from where it's produced to where it's needed most? How can we make sure that the people who need it most have the access? How can we really make sure that food moves from the farm to the fork? And even with so much progress in Africa with policies and practices over the last number of years, they still need a lot of work on local availability and access. To a great extent, Ethiopia's famine of the 1980s had its roots in a subsistence-based agriculture system that at its best times operates precariously, and at its worst times it collapses completely like it did in the 1980s. I want to share a case tonight about how there's progress being made in Ethiopia, and how a country that was once in such despair actually now is becoming a model for smallholder farmer revitalization of agriculture. With 90 million people, Ethiopia is one of the largest, it's the second most populous country in Africa. And 85% of the people work the land in some way, mostly smallholder farmers. They produce a modest volume of produce or grain. They generally operate about 4 acres or less. You can think about the size of an average city block. What they produce in terms of food is meager, generally barely enough to feed their family for a year. And they operate at a significant disadvantage. They lack access to quality seed and good inputs and the agronomic knowledge to be able to use newer practices. One way to achieve the goal is to help to improve local agriculture and ag productivity in countries like Ethiopia. And that's the centerpiece of a project that's being led by the Ethiopia government but involving USAID and DuPont. And it's now entering its third year, and it was designed to increase the productivity of maize farming with smallholder farmers. And maize is, or corn as we call it here, is a very important crop in Ethiopia. About 8 million farmers raise maize. And despite, if you've traveled across the US Midwest where I grew up, despite the fact that it seems like every spring lush green fields of corn just kind of automatically spring up, raising maize in Ethiopia is difficult and it's risky. The crop, if a farmer doesn't have access to good quality seed, his yields can be significantly reduced. And after the harvest, maize is vulnerable to vermin and mold and theft. And so the Advanced Maize Seed Adoption Program, or AMSAP as we call it, takes a holistic approach to sustainably improving the farm capability along the value chain, really from seeds to planting to harvest to storage and distribution, again from the farm gate to the dinner plate. And let me show a short video clip that'll give you a good overview of the project.
Ethiopia's economy as it supports over 80% of the population. There are over 8 million smallholder maize farmers in Ethiopia, and they are hindered by old generation seeds that have low yields. The Advanced Maize Seed Adoption Program, or AMSAP, is a public-private partnership that is increasing distribution of high-quality seeds and transforming the productivity of smallholder maize farmers.
The Ethio Alliance for Food Security and Nutrition is a partnership between African governments, private companies, both local African companies as well as the international private sector, and donors to come together to lift 50 million people out of poverty by 2022. Small farmers in Ethiopia are trying to grow the same products as many farmers in developed countries like the United States. And those farmers deserve access to the same technologies and tools that other farmers have.
Isa sangaala marraa kumtaala 24 argadhe akkasiraa hojii toletti hin cabne akka facamdetti seeraan otoon cabin otoon jigin sirriidhaan lama baateetu gaafa lammatatti naqnummoo dhaqee akkasumatti hojii jigi midhaansa kanattuun gammachiiseen isiniin jaasa turre nu gammachiise isa akkatti facamne.
What we are seeing today here as an investment from DuPont Pioneer, which was the equivalent of $2 million, with a state-of-art seed conditioning facility, which does seed cleaning, grading, treating, and packing, and as well as a warehouse, which can also store up to 4,500 metric tons.
The benefits of AMSAP have already been felt by thousands of households across Ethiopia. The program was demonstrated by 320 model farmers last year. It expanded to 3,200 model farmers this year and will sweep across the country to 32,000 model farmers by next year.
We believe that the private sector has a big role in terms of technology access, in terms of extension support, and particularly the seed and the technology multiplication aspect is basically and will be driven by the private sector.
The AMSAP partnership is actually a fantastic example of a very well-functioning public-private partnership in Ethiopia. AMSAP brings together one of the world's leading agricultural companies, DuPont Pioneer, along with one of Ethiopia's most important development partners, USAID, to bring to fore a market-based solution for smallholder farmers.
AMSAP provides a scalable model that takes a holistic approach of addressing food insecurity. I look forward to seeing how AMSAP continues to generate rippling effects to improve the lives of people in Ethiopia, one farm at a time.
Madabara ittiin bitanna, qallaban ta'a, gibiran kaffala, tirfiisin horiisin bitanna, tirfii arganneerra. Horiisin bitan, horiillee qabna malee. Horiisin bitanna tirfii baay'eetti xixiqqimee qabna misgaanaan waaqayyoon badii. waan baay'ee irra oolchan.
So AMSAP is an innovative multi-year partnership. It aims to improve productivity on the farm in 4 ways. First of all, to help farmers move from open pollinated varieties of seed that they've used for decades without any improvement, to hybrid seeds that are adapted for their local environment. The whole aim is to improve yields, and in the first year, we saw yields in some cases increase by 5-fold. And the improved seeds and the agronomy or the agronomic practices to go with it are a critical piece of helping a farmer actually move forward. Agronomic advice like the proper placement and spacing for seeds and the right type of fertilizer and the right rates and placing for the fertilizer all can make a huge difference when they have that information in addition to the quality inputs. And that in turn means that farmers can feed their families more securely, but also earn profits. The second aspect or the focus of the program is to reduce post-harvest loss. And with warehouses in local areas, not only is seed quality improved and more available to farmers, but they're able to securely store their crop after they harvest. 2 big advantages. First, they can store it safely, which means they don't have to take the market price right at harvest time. They can wait until the market improves. And of course, the second thing is since it's securely stored, they're not losing it, and they're seeing increases or reductions in post-harvest loss of up to 20%. The third area of focus for the project is around expanding access to credit, to help farmers have the access to the financing to be able to get the inputs and the other equipment that they might need. Credit programs that are funded by USAID and the government of Ethiopia have been a huge help. Things like their blended fertilizer program and their direct seed marketing program have been key. And the fourth area is around building capacity of extension services to be able to disseminate skills and best practices. And this step is critical because for the transformation of maize growing to really be sustainable long-term, it needs to be broadened and deepened, and that training capacity is critical. At heart, AMSAP is really thought to be a catalyst, a foundation of a stronger agriculture-based economy, and hopefully a model that can be emulated. And each partner contributes something of importance to the success of the project. DuPont provided sample seed that can be used for demonstration plots and field training. We also are developing a farmer-dealer network to be able to support access to high-quality seeds and the agronomic practices in a broader array. The project, as you heard in the film, started in 2013, and by the end of this year, we'll have completed 8,500 demonstration plots. We will have reached over 30,000 farmers with field days and demonstrations, and by 2018, we expect to exceed 100,000 farmers. Now, that might not sound like much. When I mentioned earlier, it's a country with 8 million farmers raising maize. But AMSAP is intended to demonstrate a scalable and replicable model that can be the foundation that can be then taken to other places and then be part of a larger transformation over time. And participating farmers are already transforming their economic situation with higher incomes and higher standards of living. We've seen increases in income of up to $500. Now this is in a country where the per capita income today averages $470, so it's significant. And they're getting links to training and storage and better inputs to be able to sustain their operation going forward. In the video, you heard from one farmer, Eta Kiwota, and she described the impact that AMSAP has had on her. I'd like to share another experience of a farmer that I met several years ago when I was traveling in rural areas of Ethiopia. And his story really is, in a large part, the inspiration for the AMSAP project. Debebi Ayala was introduced to hybrid seeds and agronomic practices several years before AMSAP came into being. And he's very proud of the significant impact that the seeds and the agronomy help had on his operation and on his life. He certainly got higher yields, But he also got something he'd never seen before, profits. And he used those profits to invest. The first thing he invested in was education for his children. The second thing was he put a new roof on their house to help protect the family. And then he started to invest in his operation. He expanded his farm. And Debebi now is very pleased to share his learnings with people from surrounding villages. In fact, he's really become a community leader, well respected for his knowledge and also for his success. You know, it's easy to understand the benefits in purely economic terms of a project like AMSAC, but it encompasses so much more. Food security and economic growth obviously are critical, but the advantages of improved local production of grain can be life-changing for individuals as well as for a society. And programs like AMSAC can help move smallholder farmers from subsistence and to commercial success, from dependence and poverty to independence with a sense of pride. And it can actually instill hope in a people often locked in a cycle of poverty. AMSAP is now being customized for application in other countries across sub-Saharan Africa, and it coincides with a special focus of the African Union on agriculture and food security. And they acknowledge the importance of smallholder farmers, as well as the importance of companies and NGOs and governments working together. Others have endorsed the approach. At the African Union Summit last year, the Secretary General of the FAO said, and I quote, "For many years, and in many parts of the world, small-scale farmers were viewed as part of the problem of hunger. That couldn't be further from the truth. Family farmers already are the main food producers in most countries, and they can do even more with the right kind of support. Our job is to create the conditions so they can blossom. This means transforming subsistence farmers into efficient and productive actors." And at DuPont, we share that positive view of smallholder farmers, and it's our goal to help them become efficient and productive members of society. You know, we all want to eliminate hunger and all of the suffering that accompanies it. But sadly, famines and food insecurity are going to be with us as long as there are disruptions to production or to the flow of food from the farm to where it's needed most. But you know, we have the capacity to change that. I shared a case study today. It's one innovative public-private partnership called AMSAP. But it's going to take all of us in our own way, focusing the energy and the resources and the skills that we each have to make sure that people everywhere have enough nutritious food to eat. Together, we can provide hope and possibility to millions of people around the world, from the farm gate to their dinner plate.